Behind the golden gates of Buckingham
It's a pleasure
Palace,
to see you
where
again.
centuries
Oh, the
of royal
feeling is
secrets lie
mutual.
buried beneath pristine marble floors, a single decision would shatter decades of careful planning. When Prince Charles finally spoke the words that had been burning in his heart for 30 years, the silence that followed wasn't just shock. It was the sound of the British monarchy holding its breath. In the grand throne room where kings had declared wars and queens had shaped empires, Charles made a choice that would redefine not just his own destiny, but the future of the crown itself. The woman he had always loved stood beside him, while the woman the establishment had groomed for decades watched her carefully constructed world crumble with each word he spoke. This is the untold story of love, power, and the moment when a future king chose his heart over his crown, and how that choice sent shockwaves through the palace halls that are still echoing today. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as Charles Philip Arthur George mounted his favorite horse, Centennial. It was 1970, and the young Prince of Wales had no idea that this seemingly ordinary day would mark the beginning of a love story that would challenge the very foundations of the British royal family. At 22, Charles carried himself with the practiced elegance expected of future kings. Yet beneath his composed exterior burned a restless spirit yearning for something the palace protocols couldn't provide: authentic connection. The weight of his destiny pressed upon his shoulders like an invisible crown, growing heavier with each passing year as courtiers whispered about suitable marriages and royal bloodlines. The polo match that afternoon was meant to be a simple social gathering, the kind of refined entertainment where aristocratic families mingled while their children formed the connections that would shape Britain's future. Charles adjusted his riding helmet, his mind wandering to the endless succession of appropriate young women his family had paraded before him. Each possessed impeccable breeding, flawless manners, and the kind of beauty that graced magazine covers, yet none had stirred anything deeper than polite interest in his heart. As he guided Centennial toward the field, Charles noticed a young woman standing beside the boundary rails. Catherine Elizabeth Middleton had arrived at the match with friends from university, her presence unremarkable to most observers, but magnetic to the prince who had grown weary of calculated charm. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her dark hair, which caught the afternoon sunlight as she laughed at something her companion had said. What struck Charles wasn't her beauty, though she possessed an effortless grace that outshone the elaborate gowns surrounding her. It was the genuine nature of her laughter, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, and how she seemed completely unaware that her presence had captured the attention of Britain's future king. In a world where every gesture felt choreographed, Kate's authenticity blazed like a beacon. The match proceeded with its usual pageantry, but Charles found his attention divided between the thundering hooves beneath him and the young woman who had somehow managed to make conversation with the groundskeeper's daughter as if status meant nothing. During a break between chukkers, he made his way to where she stood, his heart beating with an unfamiliar nervousness that royal training hadn't prepared him for. Their first conversation lasted only minutes, but those precious moments revealed depths that years of royal courtship hadn't uncovered. Kate spoke about her studies in art history with passionate intelligence, her eyes lighting up as she described a particular Renaissance painting that had captured her imagination. She asked thoughtful questions about his polo ponies, displaying genuine curiosity rather than the rehearsed interest he'd grown accustomed to receiving. When Charles mentioned his love for organic farming, expecting the polite nod that usually greeted this topic, Kate surprised him by sharing her own concerns about environmental conservation. Her knowledge wasn't superficial dinner party chatter, but reflected real understanding and sincere caring about the world beyond palace walls. As they talked, Charles felt something he hadn't experienced before: the intoxicating possibility of being known and understood rather than simply admired and pursued. Meanwhile, across the country, in a different social sphere entirely, Camilla Rosemary Shand was building her own relationship with the royal family through more traditional channels. The daughter of a wine merchant who had built connections within aristocratic circles, Camilla possessed the kind of sophisticated charm that opened doors in high society. Her wit was sharp, her manner confident, and her understanding of royal protocol impeccable. Camilla had first encountered Charles at a polo match years earlier, though their paths hadn't aligned romantically at that time. She was vivacious and worldly in ways that appealed to certain members of the royal establishment, particularly those who believed the future king needed a partner who understood the complex web of traditions and expectations that governed royal life. Where Kate represented fresh authenticity, Camilla embodied polished experience. She moved through royal social circles with practiced ease, always knowing the right thing to say, the appropriate gesture to make, and how to navigate the treacherous waters of palace politics. Her friendship with various members of the aristocracy, including some of Charles's closest advisors, had positioned her as an increasingly familiar presence in the prince's social orbit. The royal family, led by Queen Elizabeth II, observed these developing relationships with the careful calculation that had preserved the monarchy for centuries. They understood that Charles's choice of bride would impact not just his personal happiness, but the stability and public perception of the institution they served. The Queen Mother, in particular, had strong opinions about what kind of woman could successfully fulfill the demanding role of future queen consort. Palace advisors began conducting discreet inquiries into both women's backgrounds, their families' histories, and their potential suitability for royal life. Kate's middle-class origins were noted, along with her family's successful business ventures that had elevated their social standing. Some viewed this as refreshing evidence that the monarchy could evolve with changing times, while others worried about the precedent of accepting someone without aristocratic bloodlines. Camilla's background presented different considerations. Her connections to established families were impeccable, her social skills refined through years of high society experience. Yet some advisors harbored concerns about aspects of her past that might prove problematic under the intense scrutiny that would accompany a royal engagement. Charles found himself caught between two worlds, each represented by a remarkable woman who stirred different aspects of his complex personality. With Kate, he discovered the joy of unguarded conversation and the possibility of love based on genuine compatibility rather than strategic alliance. Her laughter came freely, her opinions were her own, and her interest in him felt refreshingly real rather than calculated. His growing feelings for Kate created internal conflict that kept him awake during long palace nights. The rational part of his mind, trained from birth to prioritize duty above desire, recognized the challenges that a relationship with someone outside traditional aristocratic circles might present. Yet his heart had awakened to possibilities that no amount of royal training could suppress. The contrast became more apparent during formal palace gatherings, where both women occasionally appeared. Kate's natural grace adapted to royal protocol without losing her essential authenticity, though she sometimes seemed overwhelmed by the elaborate ceremonies and complex social hierarchies that governed palace life. Her wonder at the historical treasures and traditions was genuine, making her seem like a breath of fresh air in rooms heavy with centuries of formality. Camilla navigated these same gatherings with the confidence of someone born to such environments. She understood instinctively which conversations to join, which dignitaries to acknowledge, and how to present herself as both approachable and appropriately regal. Her comfort with royal expectations impressed those who worried about the monarchy's future in changing times. As spring turned to summer, Charles found his thoughts increasingly occupied with comparisons between the two relationships developing in his life. Late evening walks through the palace gardens became opportunities to wrestle with questions that had no clear answers. How much should personal happiness influence decisions that would affect millions of people? Could genuine love overcome the practical challenges of uniting different social worlds? Would choosing authenticity over convention strengthen or weaken the monarchy his family had spent centuries building? The pressure intensified when palace advisors began dropping hints about the importance of making decisions about his personal future. At 22, Charles wasn't facing immediate pressure to marry, but the groundwork for such decisions needed careful laying. Every public appearance, every photographed conversation, every social interaction was analyzed for its potential impact on royal succession and public opinion. During a quiet moment in the palace library, surrounded by centuries of royal history, Charles contemplated the portraits of his ancestors who had faced similar crossroads between personal desire and royal duty. Some had chosen love and changed the course of British history, while others had prioritized tradition and stability above personal happiness. Each path had carried consequences that rippled through generations. The weight of these considerations pressed upon him as he prepared for another social gathering where both Kate and Camilla would be present. Standing before his dressing mirror, adjusting formal attire that had been tailored to project royal authority, Charles wondered if authentic happiness was possible within the gilded constraints of his birthright, or if he was destined to choose between his heart and his crown before he even fully understood what either truly meant to him. The autumn of 1972 brought an unexpected turn to the delicate dance of royal courtship that had been unfolding within palace circles. Charles had spent months navigating the complex emotions stirred by two remarkable women, each offering a different vision of what his future might hold. The crisp October air carried whispers of change through the corridors of Buckingham Palace, where servants had begun to notice the prince's increasingly frequent private meetings with his closest advisors. Kate had grown more comfortable in royal settings, though she maintained the refreshing authenticity that had first captured Charles's attention. Her art history studies had led to fascinating conversations about the palace's extensive collection, and she often surprised courtiers with her insightful observations about pieces they had long taken for granted. During a recent gallery tour, she had pointed out details in a Van Dyck portrait that revealed the artist's subtle commentary on royal power, observations that impressed even the palace's most scholarly curators. Her growing ease with royal protocol hadn't diminished the qualities Charles found most appealing. She still laughed with genuine delight at his stories about palace life, asked thoughtful questions that revealed her sincere interest in understanding his world, and offered perspectives that helped him see familiar situations through fresh eyes. When they walked together through the palace gardens, she noticed flowers and architectural details that lifelong residents had forgotten to appreciate. Yet the very authenticity Charles treasured in Kate also highlighted the vast differences between their backgrounds. During state dinners, she sometimes appeared overwhelmed by the elaborate protocols governing everything from conversation topics to the proper use of the 17 pieces of silverware at each place setting. While her natural grace helped her navigate these challenges, Charles could see the effort required to adapt to a world so different from her university environment. Palace advisors had begun conducting more intensive evaluations of Kate's suitability for royal life. Her family's business success was viewed favorably, demonstrating the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that modern Britain celebrated. However, some traditionalists worried about the precedent of accepting someone without aristocratic bloodlines into the direct line of succession. Background investigations revealed nothing concerning, but they also uncovered the vast gulf between middle-class respectability and the rarefied world of hereditary nobility. Meanwhile, Camilla had strengthened her position within royal social circles through strategic cultivation of key relationships. Her friendship with several of Charles's cousins provided natural opportunities to attend intimate gatherings where her wit and social skills shone brightest. She had an intuitive understanding of palace dynamics that allowed her to navigate complex family relationships and long-standing feuds with diplomatic finesse. During a particularly challenging family dinner where tensions over political matters threatened to create awkwardness, Camilla had demonstrated her value by smoothly redirecting conversation towards safer topics while making each family member feel heard and respected. Her ability to defuse tension while maintaining dignity impressed Queen Elizabeth II, who had begun to see Camilla as potentially valuable to the monarchy's stability. Camilla's romantic interest in Charles had deepened gradually, built on shared experiences and mutual understanding of the unique pressures facing the royal family. She appreciated the burden of his position in ways that Kate, despite her best efforts, couldn't fully grasp. When Charles expressed frustration with public criticism of royal expenses, Camilla offered both sympathy and practical suggestions for improving public relations based on her observations of successful aristocratic families. The contrast between the two women became most apparent during a weekend gathering at Sandringham Estate, where both were among the guests invited for the annual autumn shooting party. Kate's discomfort with the traditional hunt was evident, though she tried to mask her feelings out of respect for royal customs. Her background hadn't prepared her for the casual violence that aristocratic families considered normal recreation, and her obvious distress during the morning's activities created subtle tension among other guests. Camilla, by contrast, participated in the hunt with enthusiasm born of lifelong experience. She handled firearms with practiced competence, understood the complex etiquette governing such events, and moved through the day's activities with the comfortable confidence of someone completely at home in this environment. Her ease helped other participants relax and enjoy themselves, while Kate's visible discomfort cast a slight shadow over the proceedings. These differences weren't lost on the royal family members present, who began forming opinions about which woman would better serve the monarchy's interests. Some appreciated Kate's fresh perspective and obvious sincerity, viewing her as a bridge between the royal family and ordinary British citizens. Others favored Camilla's seamless integration into established traditions and her ability to strengthen rather than challenge existing social structures. Charles found himself increasingly torn between admiration for Kate's authentic goodness and appreciation for Camilla's sophisticated understanding of his world. Late evening conversations with Kate often focused on subjects that engaged his intellect and idealism: environmental conservation, social justice, the role of monarchy in modern democracy. These discussions energized him and made him feel hopeful about possibilities for positive change. Conversations with Camilla tended toward more practical matters related to royal duties and family obligations. She offered astute observations about managing public appearances, maintaining relationships with political leaders, and balancing personal desires with institutional responsibilities. Her insights were valuable and her support reassuring, particularly during periods when public criticism of the royal family intensified. The emotional complexity of Charles's situation deepened when palace advisors began pressing for clarity about his romantic intentions. Private secretaries hinted that media speculation about his relationships was becoming problematic, requiring either official confirmation or deliberate distancing to protect the monarchy's reputation. The pressure to make decisions felt premature to Charles, who believed genuine love required time to develop properly. During a private meeting with Queen Elizabeth II, Charles faced direct questions about his personal plans that he couldn't deflect with diplomatic non-answers. The Queen expressed concern about the impact of prolonged uncertainty on royal family dynamics and public perception. She emphasized the importance of choosing a partner who could strengthen rather than complicate the monarchy's position in rapidly changing times. The conversation left Charles feeling simultaneously understood and constrained. His mother's perspective was shaped by decades of experience managing the delicate balance between personal happiness and royal duty, yet her advice didn't resolve the fundamental tension between his heart and his obligations. The weight of knowing that his choice would affect not just his own life, but the institution he would someday lead made every interaction with both women feel heavy with consequences. Winter brought additional complications when media attention to Charles's romantic life intensified dramatically. Photographers began following both Kate and Camilla, analyzing their every public appearance for signs of royal favor. The scrutiny proved particularly challenging for Kate, whose family had no experience with such invasive attention. Her parents received unexpected phone calls from journalists seeking information about their daughter's relationship with the prince, creating stress that affected their business and personal life. Camilla handled media attention with the poise expected from someone familiar with high society visibility, though she too felt the pressure of constant observation. Her established social connections helped provide some protection, as aristocratic families had long experience managing press interest while maintaining privacy. However, the intensity of coverage surrounding potential royal romance exceeded anything in her previous experience. The media circus forced Charles to confront the reality that his romantic choices would subject his chosen partner to lifelong scrutiny that few people could handle successfully. Kate's genuine distress over invasive coverage made him question whether asking someone to accept such sacrifice was fair, regardless of love's strength. Camilla's better adjustment to media pressure seemed to suggest greater suitability for royal life. Yet Charles worried that prioritizing practical considerations over emotional connection might doom any marriage to hollowness. Palace security became involved when photographers' pursuit of both women reached dangerous levels. Near accidents involving paparazzi chasing cars carrying Kate or Camilla reminded everyone of the tragic precedent set by Diana Spencer's death, adding urgency to discussions about Charles's romantic future. The royal family could not afford another tragedy resulting from media obsession with royal romance. As winter deepened, Charles spent long hours walking alone through snow-covered palace grounds, wrestling with decisions that seemed impossible to make correctly. The gardens where he had enjoyed countless conversations with both women now felt like a maze of conflicting emotions and incompatible desires. Every path forward seemed to require sacrificing something precious, either authentic love for practical wisdom or institutional stability for personal happiness. The approach of spring brought rumors that decisions were imminent, though Charles felt no closer to clarity than he had months earlier. Palace staff began preparing for potential announcements while hoping their preparations wouldn't prove premature. The British public, increasingly fascinated by their future king's romantic life, waited eagerly for news that would either celebrate love's triumph or confirm tradition's enduring power over individual desire. The spring of 1973 arrived with unprecedented pressure mounting around Charles's romantic decisions, as palace advisors grew increasingly concerned about the impact of prolonged uncertainty on royal stability. Behind closed doors, heated discussions took place about the strategic implications of each potential choice, with senior courtiers presenting detailed analyses of how Kate versus Camilla might affect everything from Commonwealth relations to domestic political stability. Sir Martin Charteris, the Queen's private secretary, had prepared extensive briefings about both women that went far beyond surface considerations of personality and compatibility. Kate's middle-class background was dissected for its potential to modernize the monarchy's image while risking alienation of traditional supporters who viewed aristocratic bloodlines as essential to royal legitimacy. Her genuine popularity with younger demographics was weighed against concerns from older establishment figures who questioned whether someone without hereditary privilege could successfully navigate the complex web of constitutional responsibilities facing a future queen consort. The Middleton family's business success had generated detailed economic analyses examining their financial independence and social mobility as symbols of modern Britain's aspirational values. Palace economists noted that Kate's background could help the monarchy connect with middle-class citizens who formed the backbone of British society, potentially strengthening public support during an era when Republican sentiment was growing among intellectuals and younger voters. However, these same advisors worried about Kate's obvious discomfort with certain royal traditions that remained important to the monarchy's relationship with established institutions. Her distress over hunting parties had been noted not just as personal preference, but as potential indication of deeper philosophical differences with practices that bound the royal family to centuries of rural aristocratic culture. Some feared that such differences might create friction with powerful families whose support remained crucial to royal stability. Camilla's position within establishment circles had grown stronger through careful cultivation of relationships with key figures in British society. Her friendship with influential members of Parliament, senior military officers, and leaders of major charitable organizations positioned her as a bridge between the royal family and the traditional power structures that sustain the monarchy's constitutional role. During recent social gatherings, she had demonstrated remarkable skill in conversations with foreign dignitaries, showing the kind of diplomatic instincts that could prove invaluable during state visits and international negotiations. Palace Foreign Office advisors had begun viewing Camilla as potentially crucial to maintaining Britain's soft power influence through royal diplomacy. Her understanding of European aristocratic customs, combined with her natural charm and sophisticated manner, suggested she could excel in the ceremonial aspects of royal duty that remained important to international relations. Recent conversations with visiting heads of state had left several impressed by her knowledge of their country's histories and cultural sensitivities. Yet even Camilla's supporters within palace circles acknowledged concerns about aspects of her background that might prove problematic under intense public scrutiny. Her previous relationships and social connections included figures whose reputations might not withstand the investigation that would inevitably accompany a royal engagement announcement. Palace security had identified potential vulnerabilities that required careful management to prevent embarrassing revelations during what should be celebratory periods. Charles found himself increasingly isolated as the weight of these considerations pressed upon him from all directions. Private meetings with various advisors left him feeling more confused rather than enlightened, as each expert emphasized different factors while claiming their perspective was most crucial to his ultimate success as king. The romantic choices that should have been matters of personal happiness had become strategic decisions affecting millions of people and centuries of institutional tradition. During a particularly intense discussion with his father, Prince Philip, Charles faced direct pressure to prioritize practical considerations over emotional attachments. Philip argued that successful royal marriages throughout history had been based on compatibility of purpose rather than passionate love, pointing to numerous examples of royals who had found happiness through shared dedication to duty rather than romantic idealism. The conversation left Charles questioning whether his desire for authentic love was selfish indulgence that could undermine his effectiveness as a future monarch. The emotional toll of these pressures became evident during private moments when Charles struggled to maintain his public composure. Palace staff noticed his increasing tendency towards solitary walks and his reluctance to engage in casual conversation that might require him to reveal his internal struggles. The prince, who had once been known for his wit and charm in social situations, began appearing distant and preoccupied, leading to speculation about his mental state among courtiers who depended on royal stability for their own positions. Kate sensed the growing pressure surrounding Charles without fully understanding its sources or implications. Her attempts to offer support were hampered by her limited knowledge of royal protocols and constitutional requirements that govern such decisions. During their private conversations, she could see the weight he carried, but felt helpless to provide the kind of assistance that might actually prove useful. Her love for him was genuine and deep, yet she began questioning whether that love was sufficient to overcome the enormous challenges facing any woman who married into the royal family. The media attention that had initially seemed manageable became genuinely frightening as photographers grew more aggressive in pursuit of exclusive images. Kate's daily life became a constant exercise in avoiding cameras while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Her university studies suffered as she found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on academic work while managing the stress of constant surveillance. Friends and family members were repeatedly approached by journalists seeking information about her relationship with Charles, creating tension in personal relationships that had previously provided stability and support. Camilla's experience with media pressure was different, but equally challenging in its own way. Her sophisticated understanding of public relations helped her manage photographers more effectively, yet the intensity of scrutiny exceeded anything she had previously experienced. Long-established friendships began feeling strained as social acquaintances started viewing every conversation as potential source material for gossip columns. The comfortable social world she had spent years building felt increasingly fragile under the pressure of potential royal connection. Palace security assessments revealed disturbing escalation in both women's vulnerability to harassment and potential danger. The paparazzi following Kate had grown increasingly reckless in their pursuit, creating dangerous traffic situations that reminded security officials of the circumstances leading to Princess Diana's tragic death. Protective measures were quietly implemented for both women, though these same measures highlighted the reality that involvement with Charles meant accepting lifelong constraints on personal freedom and privacy. Charles began having sleepless nights filled with anxiety about the impossible choices facing him. The romantic relationship that should have brought joy and fulfillment had become a source of constant stress that affected every aspect of his life. Public appearances required careful management to avoid photographed interactions that might be interpreted as favoring one woman over another. Private time became precious commodity that had to be scheduled around security concerns and media management strategies. During a crisis meeting with senior advisors, Charles learned that delay in making romantic decisions was beginning to affect other royal family members' ability to plan their own activities. Public speculation about his love life was overshadowing important charitable work and policy initiatives that deserved greater attention. The monarchy's effectiveness was being compromised by excessive focus on his personal relationships, creating pressure for resolution that made thoughtful decision-making even more difficult. The psychological pressure intensified when Charles realized that his choice would not just determine his own happiness, but would establish precedents affecting future generations of royals. If he chose Kate, he would signal that love could triumph over tradition, potentially encouraging other family members to prioritize personal desires over institutional requirements. If he selected Camilla, he would reinforce the importance of choosing partners who strengthened rather than challenged existing power structures, possibly constraining romantic freedom for decades to come. Late-night conversations with trusted friends revealed the depth of Charles's emotional turmoil as he struggled to balance competing desires and obligations. His genuine love for Kate warred with his recognition that Camilla might prove more suitable for royal duties. His desire to modernize the monarchy conflicted with his responsibility to preserve institutional stability. His hope for personal happiness seemed increasingly incompatible with his duty to serve the British people effectively. As summer approached, palace advisors began preparing for decisions they hoped would finally resolve the uncertainty that had dominated royal planning for months. Secret preparations were made for multiple scenarios, including engagement announcements, gradual relationship cooling, and various public relations strategies designed to manage whatever choices Charles ultimately made. The British public, unaware of the complexity of considerations affecting their future king, continued following the romantic drama with fascination that bordered on obsession. Charles stood at his bedroom window, overlooking the palace gardens where he had enjoyed countless conversations with both women, knowing that decisions made in coming weeks would shape not just his personal future, but the destiny of the British monarchy itself. The weight of a crown that he wouldn't wear for decades already pressed heavily upon his heart, forcing him to choose between love and duty in ways that would echo through generations of royal history yet to be written. The morning of July 15th, 1973, dawned with unusual stillness over Buckingham Palace, as if the ancient building itself was holding its breath for the announcement that would reshape the British monarchy. Charles had spent the previous night in restless contemplation, walking the corridors where centuries of his ancestors had faced their own moments of destiny. By dawn, he had reached the decision that would define not only his personal future, but the very nature of royal duty in modern times. Palace staff moved through their morning routines with heightened awareness that this day would mark a turning point in royal history. Senior advisors had been summoned for an emergency meeting, while press secretaries prepared for multiple scenarios without knowing which announcement they would soon be crafting. The atmosphere within the palace walls buzzed with anticipation and nervous energy as everyone from kitchen staff to senior courtiers sensed that momentous changes were imminent. Charles appeared for breakfast with an unusual calmness that surprised those who had witnessed his weeks of internal struggle. The weight that had pressed upon his shoulders seemed to have lifted, replaced by the serene determination of someone who had finally achieved clarity after months of impossible complexity. His personal valet noted that the prince dressed with particular care, selecting attire that projected both authority and accessibility, a symbolic choice that would prove prophetic. The first person Charles spoke with that morning was his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, in a private meeting that lasted over an hour behind the closed doors of her study. Palace staff could only speculate about the conversation's content, but the Queen's expression when she emerged suggested both surprise and cautious approval of whatever her son had decided. Her brief nod to waiting advisors indicated that Charles's choice, while unexpected, had received royal blessing. By mid-morning, invitations had been quietly sent to both Kate and Camilla, requesting their presence at the palace for separate meetings that afternoon. Neither woman knew the other had been summoned, though both understood that these conversations would likely determine their futures. The careful scheduling ensured they wouldn't encounter each other during what promised to be emotionally charged visits. Kate arrived first, her natural grace evident despite obvious nervousness about the meeting's purpose. She had chosen a simple blue dress similar to the one she'd worn when first meeting Charles at the polo match years earlier, a subtle reminder of the authentic connection that had sparked their relationship. Palace staff who had grown fond of her warmth and genuine kindness watched anxiously as she was escorted to the private salon where Charles waited. The conversation between Charles and Kate lasted nearly 2 hours, during which palace corridors remained unusually quiet as staff instinctively avoided the area. When Kate finally emerged, tears streaming down her face, her expression revealed both heartbreak and something that might have been relief. The tremendous pressure of potential royal life had weighed heavily upon her, and while rejection brought painful disappointment, it also offered freedom from a future that had seemed increasingly overwhelming. Charles had spoken to Kate with the honesty and respect their relationship deserved, acknowledging the genuine love they had shared while explaining the impossible pressures that made their union inadvisable. He praised her character, her intelligence, and her natural goodness, while admitting that the royal system was not designed to accommodate someone whose authenticity might challenge established traditions. The conversation was painful, but conducted with the dignity that both parties deserved. Kate's departure from the palace was managed discreetly to avoid media attention, though photographers stationed outside the gates noted her obvious emotional state. Palace security ensured her safe passage home, where family members who had been briefed about possible outcomes waited to provide support during what they knew would be a difficult period of adjustment and healing. Camilla's arrival in the early evening was observed by the same photographers, though her composed demeanor revealed nothing about her expectations or emotions. She moved through the palace halls with the confidence of someone familiar with royal environments, greeting staff members who had grown accustomed to her presence during recent months. Her meeting with Charles took place in the same salon where Kate had received her news, though the conversation's tone and outcome would be dramatically different. When Charles informed Camilla of his decision to pursue their relationship toward marriage, her reaction was notably subdued. Rather than expressing overwhelming joy, she demonstrated the sophisticated emotional control that had impressed palace advisors throughout their courtship. Her response focused on the responsibilities and challenges they would face together rather than romantic celebration, revealing her practical understanding of what royal marriage truly entailed. The engagement announcement was delayed for several days to allow for proper planning and coordination with various government offices, foreign embassies, and Commonwealth representatives who needed advance notice of such significant royal news. During this interval, Charles spent considerable time with senior advisors reviewing the implications of his choice and preparing for the public and political reactions that would inevitably follow. Palace press secretaries worked around the clock, crafting announcements that would present the engagement in the most favorable light possible, while addressing potential concerns about Camilla's suitability for royal duty. Her aristocratic background was emphasized, along with her charitable involvements and social connections that demonstrated her preparation for royal responsibilities. Careful attention was paid to language that would minimize negative reactions from those who had favored Kate's more relatable background. When the engagement was finally announced on July 22nd, the public reaction proved as complex and divided as palace advisors had predicted. Traditional royal supporters expressed satisfaction with Charles's choice of someone from established aristocratic circles, viewing Camilla as appropriately prepared for the demands of royal life. Her sophisticated manner and obvious comfort with royal protocols impressed those who prioritized institutional stability over romantic idealism. However, significant portions of the British public had grown fond of Kate through media coverage that portrayed her as a genuine, relatable young woman who represented modern British values. Her middle-class background and authentic personality had made her a symbol of the monarchy's potential evolution toward greater accessibility and connection with ordinary citizens. News of her rejection prompted disappointed reactions from those who had seen her as representing their own aspirations and possibilities. The media coverage of the engagement reflected this public division, with some outlets celebrating Charles's wise choice of an experienced partner, while others expressed regret about the lost opportunity for royal modernization that Kate had represented. Editorial commentary revealed deep philosophical differences about the monarchy's role in contemporary British society and whether tradition or transformation should guide royal decisions. International reactions varied significantly based on different countries' relationships with the British monarchy and their own cultural attitudes toward aristocratic institutions. Commonwealth nations with strong democratic traditions generally supported Charles's right to choose based on personal preference, while maintaining interest in how his choice might affect the monarchy's future evolution. European aristocratic families expressed satisfaction with Camilla's selection, viewing it as confirmation that hereditary privilege remained important in royal succession. Behind palace walls, the immediate aftermath of the announcement brought its own challenges as staff adjusted to new realities and began preparing for the extensive planning required for a royal wedding. Camilla's transition from occasional guest to future queen consort required careful management of everything from security protocols to staff assignments. Her existing relationships with various palace personnel proved helpful in smoothing these adjustments, though some staff members who had grown fond of Kate needed time to adapt to changed circumstances. Charles found that making the decision, rather than relieving pressure, had simply transformed it into different kinds of stress related to public relations management and wedding planning. The choice that had seemed so difficult in contemplation proved to be only the beginning of challenges related to successfully integrating Camilla into royal life while managing public opinion and media coverage. The romantic uncertainty that had dominated recent months was replaced by practical pressures that would continue for years to come. The long-term implications of Charles's choice would unfold over decades, affecting not only his personal happiness, but the British monarchy's relationship with its subjects and its role in rapidly changing social landscapes. The decision to prioritize traditional compatibility over transformative love established precedents that would influence royal family dynamics for generations, while the path not taken with Kate remained a subject of speculation about alternative histories that might have been. As autumn arrived and wedding preparations began in earnest, Charles reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment of destiny. The choice between Kate and Camilla had represented larger questions about the monarchy's future direction, whether it should evolve to embrace changing social values or maintain traditional structures that had sustained it through centuries of transformation. His decision had provided answers that would echo through British history, though only time would reveal whether those answers had been correct. The silence that had swept the palace on that July morning when Charles made his choice had been replaced by bustling activity focused on securing the monarchy's future through careful planning and strategic management. Yet in quiet moments, he sometimes wondered about the alternative future that might have unfolded had he chosen differently, and whether the authentic love he had shared with Kate might have proven stronger than the practical wisdom that had guided his ultimate decision toward Camilla and the promise of institutional stability she represented.